to provide all the programs and services on that IEP. So it's just necessary the first time. However, at any time in writing, you may write and revoke special education services. In other words, you put in writing, I don't want my child to have any special education services anymore. If we receive that, and I'm sure compliance can go into it a little bit more with you later if that is an issue for you, then the services stop, but you must know that if you change your mind, you start again at ground zero with an initial evaluation. Yes?
As I told you, I'm here as a parent tonight.
Mm-hmm.
So my question is, how often are the IEPs reviewed, and who oversees the process of the IEP?
Good question. The IEP is reviewed annually, so every year we take a look at your child. We will review the IEP that is in process or for that year. We take a look at it and see how much progress your child has made towards the goals in the IEPs, which I will get into in a minute. So we make sure we review all your progress. Have they met all of those goals? If not, why? And then we will prepare a new one for the next year based on their present levels of performance in all of their academic areas, and academic and emotional areas. Good question. Okay, so what is this program? And we're going to go into it a little bit more. Your question was timed perfectly. It's a written plan that will support your child in school. It will designate what their present levels of performance are, which means what exactly are they doing now? What do we want them to be able to do? What are they going to need? What needs to be put in place so that they can do that? You should be getting a draft copy before the meeting, about at least 5 days before, or there has to be one available for you so you can kind of take a look at it. Sometimes it's tough to receive one if this is your first IEP meeting because you kind of don't know what you're looking at, but we need to provide you with one. But it is a good idea just to kind of look at it, see if, read the front cover, make sure at least that your name and address are correct and all of the relevant information. And also take a look at the present levels of performance. What is the person who's writing the IEP saying? What information are they putting in there with regard to where your child is functioning? Whether it's in reading, writing, math, social emotional goals, etc. And also, prior to the meeting, when you get a draft IEP, you should prepare in your own mind or bring in a list of questions that you have for that team. Because I also am a parent of 3 children, and one of my children had an IEP. So I know sometimes when you go into these meetings, you know, it's you and there's a whole circle of other people that, you might know their names, you might not, but sometimes your brain freezes and you can't remember what it was that you wanted to express. But it's so important that you express your needs and your wants for your child, and also that your questions are answered. So try to put those down and feel free to ask those. I would, if you have specific questions, try to get those to the IEP team before the meeting. And the only reason I'm saying that is it may appear to you that they're rushed in these IEP meetings, and it's because they only have a certain amount of time that they may have allocated for your particular meeting. So if they know that it might take a little bit longer because you have some additional questions or you're bringing additional people, they'll allow more time for your meeting. This is what the front of the IEP looks like currently. And I say currently because every once in a while the IEPs are revised, and that's a good thing because we try to make them better. So currently, this is what our front page looks like, and this is the page I asked, that should be on the top, that I asked you to take a look at, make sure that contact information is correct. And it's so important to us, because if we need to contact you or send you letters, or particularly each year MSDE sends out a parent survey to find out how you feel about special education, what you think improvements need to be made in Prince George's County. That is mailed to your house. And what address do they use? The one on your IEP. So make sure all of that information is correct. On the second page, you will see what I have already discussed are your present levels of performance. That means present levels of performance will reflect what is your child doing at present. Sometimes they may list some standardized testing that had been done, that all the county takes, and maybe some test scores, but you should see in there exactly what's been going on currently. So it says, what is the parental input? Right at the top, what's the parental input? That's you. What do you have to say about the child's present levels of performance? What are you seeing are areas of weakness and strength? And that needs to go into the IEP as well. What is this present levels? Well, again, it's really taking a look at what is the child doing, what does the county, what is a general education student expected to know at this particular grade level? And then what exactly is your child doing? What are they doing well? What are they struggling with? All of those things would be on the IEP. And all of this information helps to develop the goals and objectives that you will see next on your IEP. So right here they also talk about supplementary aids and services and program modifications that might be needed. So they're going to talk about who's going to provide different services. There's going to be a discussion that should really reflect your meeting as to why your child might need some extra help. Do they need any extra supplemental services and aids in order, and program modifications for them to be successful in school? What are these? Well, they have to be specific and appropriate. They can't reduce learning expectations. So in other words, it's not that your child is not going to read this year, if they're struggling with reading, for example. But they may talk about different techniques, what type of learner your child might be, some of the instructional techniques that the teacher should use in instructing your child. All of those things need to be written down on the IEP. And why? Because this IEP, again, spans a whole year, but not necessarily the year, a school year. You have, your IEP is a calendar year long. So if you have your first meeting on March the 1st of 2014, your next annual review meeting by law will be when? Before March the 1st of 2015. So you can see why we try to make this IEP specific, because next year your child may or may not have the same teacher. So anyone that picks up or reads the IEP should know what goals are for your child, what their needs are, what do they need instructionally in order to be successful. That brings us to some supplemental aids and services, and that's the part of the IEP that looks at all of the supplemental aids and services that are available. And we are going to talk a little bit more specifically about what those are in the program. So if you're a little bit confused about what those might be, hold on, because we have a list of those and we have some explanations for you. Of course.
Where you have here, do not reduce learning
Mm-hmm.
expectations. Could you be a little more specific about what that one means? For instance, if someone has a child in third grade, but the level is not there for third grade, but for learning capabilities.
So
Are
that,
the same materials or?
that's an excellent question, and I can't answer it specifically to your child, but you can get that answer later, but I can answer it globally. We try to have goals and objectives on the IEP that are aligned to the grade level. And certainly there are some things that your child could understand at grade level, whether it's science and social studies and maybe some pictures, and maybe they're good orally but they're not good in reading. I don't know your child's disability. It would depend on the disability, but we want to always ensure and keep in mind what are grade level expectations when we're writing the IEP. And that's what we mean. Sure. Good question. Okay, so again, what kind of support does your child need in the environment, emotionally, not only educationally? And all those would be designated on the IEP. How is material going to be presented? Do they need it to be read to them, for example? Are they better learning things when they see pictures visually? All of those types of things. Now, here's the part of the IEP that will specifically say exactly what's going to be done for your child, and I think the most important part, because these are the goals and objectives for your child. The goals and objectives, again, are written annually. They shouldn't be the same year after year. You need to see them changing because your child is changing. Again, they're to be evaluated, so you should be getting a progress report. Every time you get a report card, you should get a progress report. And the progress report will reflect how they're doing with regard to their IEP goals and objectives. Are they progressing? And then there should be some kind of comment to tell you how are they progressing on those goals. It might be that they're not yet addressed, which means that is a goal we're going to take care of, but it's January now, and I plan to take care of that goal in April. So that could happen as well. The goals are always broken down into objectives, so they're very specific. They have to be measurable. You, as a parent, can come in and say, well, how do you know my child is making progress on this goal or objective? Can I see the evidence? It might be for reading a running record. If it's for math, it might be that you take a look at some quizzes or some classwork that has been done that demonstrates the knowledge towards that IEP goal or objective. But you have a right to come in and say, how do you know, that they've achieved that goal or have not achieved that goal? Because that can happen as well sometimes. Again, your progress on those goals is sent home to you as frequently as a non-disabled peer, which is why you should be getting them during report card time. And then they should align. Notice where it says, please note, annual goals and objectives should align with grade level, general education, curriculum standards, and functional performance requirements. So there's some in there that should align with grade level expectations. However, there should also be other ones that would go specifically to their performance level where they're performing now, which is why we have the present levels of performance. Okay, here's a snapshot of the IEP, which would list special education services. What special education services does your child need? Is it just classroom instruction? Are they going to be getting speech and language therapy, etc.? Also, they'll outline the services. They'll also talk about extended school year which is our school in the summer. And sometimes parents don't understand, well, how come some kids get extended school year who have special education services, and how come some students don't? And the reason is, it's based on whether or not they're in the middle of learning a critical life skill, and also whether or not they lose what they have learned if we're out over extended breaks. Related services we will also talk about a little bit. We have Ms. Sue Cesary here, who's a physical therapist, to talk about those. Those related services, meaning you cannot just get these services with, you have to have an IEP, in other words. It has to be related to your disability in order to get these services. And we will talk about them, and they are listed on the IEP. Important part of the IEP, once we talk about what your child needs, is in what environment are we going to provide these services? And that's the least restrictive environment. It comes with a discussion at every meeting. How much assistance does your child need, and where would be the best place for it? It's determined every year based on the IEP. These are the different types of settings that students with disabilities could receive help or LRE, starting from infant, toddler, all the way to home and hospital.
On the last slide in bold, sorry if I missed it, but
Yeah.
second bullet from the bottom where it says your child is educated in the school that would otherwise attend.
As long as the IEP can be implemented.
So could you explain that piece and how, who
Oh, sure.
determines that? And
Yeah, that's an important piece. What we do is we look at your child's IEP and the goals and objectives, and they will go through a checklist at the IEP from the least restrictive environment, which would be your home school, and they will take a look at whether or not they could address your child's needs with the goals and objectives that they have on the IEP and services in a general education setting, maybe with just a consult from special educators. Do they need modifications and accommodations in their classroom by a special educator? Do they need to be pulled out of their classroom by a special educator and in their classroom some of the time? Do they need to be pulled out of the classroom and receive all of their services by a special educator the whole time? Can we not meet their needs in a regular school setting, but maybe they need a separate school setting within Prince George's County Public Schools, and it goes up to a non-public setting, etc. But that's a conversation that should happen at every meeting. And if you have a specific question, please ask. Okay. So again, we're in different settings. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so I thought I verbally said, I think I stopped at the non-public schools, then we have some residential schools where a student would live there 24/7 and receive both their educational help and live there as well. And then the last would be home and hospital. And home and hospital, we have some students who receive home and hospital services who never enter a public school, but we also have some that are there for shortened periods of time. Sorry about that. So here's again our referral process from referral to special education in another format. Just kind of making it clear again visually from being either request for an evaluation, or a team is recommending an evaluation, or I did not mention that every 3 years we will do a formal re-evaluation at least. It could be more, it could be sooner than that, but if there is no reason to reevaluate, at least every 3 years we're going to take a good look and make sure that we're not missing something. Now, if you have specific questions, again, we will be happy to answer them about your own child at their school. But I'd like to welcome Sue Cesare, who's a physical therapist, who's going to go into some of our related services.
Thank you. Physical therapy is part of the related services group. We do work under the Department of Special Education, and we are in the Programs and Services Division. So some of us are related services, and some of us are services, and can sort of be standalone. And one of those is speech and language. So I believe that they may be on there. So sometimes our students just have speech language needs. They are considered special education students, but they may not have speech and language as a related service because that is their primary issue. But for the majority of us, we are what we would consider a related service. So the students need to qualify for special education. They don't qualify for our service first, they qualify for special education first. And then there is a discussion about what other supports and services are necessary for this student to be in their least restrictive environment, making progress in their curriculum, and be able to perform all the activities and tasks that are required of them. And so transportation, audiology, counseling, nursing, occupational therapy, physical therapy, vision, orientation, and mobility, where we're teaching our blind students how to navigate their environments and their communities. We talked about speech, assisted technology, where we might be exploring the use of devices for students to access particular pieces of their curriculum or to become more active in their school setting. Deaf blindness, adapted physical education, so where students might need some supports in their physical education program, something specialized, something different from the general ed kids. So we generally have two approaches to our students. So I'm going to talk about services on behalf of the student first. Mary mentioned supplementary aids and services, and much of what we do, and often the greatest value, the biggest bang for the buck that we provide, comes through supplementary aids and services. We know that children in special education really require the collaboration among the professionals that work with your students, because we all have a little different perspective. And so this piece, the consultation and collaboration, is part of supplementary aids and services. And as Mary showed you on that snapshot of that page, you will see consultation for physical therapy, occupational therapy, and some of the other services documented right on there. And it would be listed very specifically about what it is that we would be addressing. And again, that would be in collaboration with your school team members. A lot of what we do also is training other school personnel. Speaking as a physical therapist, we use a lot of adaptive equipment, especially for our more physically challenged students, and we need to train the people who are using that equipment on a daily basis. Our occupational therapists will go in and train paraprofessionals on the use of certain writing instruments or specialized paper to help their students with their documentation skills. The assistive technology team will come in and teach the teachers how to implement the keyboarding devices or any of the other high-tech things that are now available to our students. So that's a really, really critical piece of the whole special ed process. These student-centered discussions, the consultation, sometimes with outside personnel. I'm a healthcare provider as a physical therapist. It's very important for me to understand the medical history of students that come into some of our schools. And so we really ask our parents and our caregivers to provide us the ability to talk to some of those people, because the insight from the community is going to be different from mine, and so the combination of those two things really benefits our kids. And then, And then lastly, adapting and acquiring materials. Lots of times we trial different things to help our children become successful, and it's a very large part of what we do. So then there's services to a student, and we like to use this terminology because it's probably, if you've heard the term direct services, that's what this represents. It's the work with the student more in a one-on-one or maybe in a group setting. And it's usually to develop skills or to refine skills. Sometimes we work in the classroom, sometimes we work out of the classroom. If we work out of the classroom, we always take that back into the classroom because that's where the student's really going to need to be able to use that skill. But the key here is that whenever we remove a child from a classroom, we're keeping them from their instruction, and our job is to keep them in their classroom so they can benefit from their instruction. So we think very carefully about whether or not we should be removing kids from class. So our first choice is always to provide those supplementary aids and services and then work to push in to the classroom. And if anyone is interested in finding out any more about that, because sometimes that can be a little controversial for families because there's a little lack of understanding about the value of that, I'm happy to talk about it after we're finished with the presentation today. So in terms of provision, we talked a little bit about that's generally in the classroom instead of out. But the team determines who the related service provider needs to be by who has the greatest level of expertise to address whatever that particular issue is that's been identified through the assessment process that Mary has talked about, through the description of the supplementary aids and services. And again, the services could be delivered to the student or on behalf of the student. Most often, it's a combination of those two things in greater or lesser degree of one or the other. But they are both described on the IEP on the pages that Mary shared with you that were snapshots. But our key is access, participation, and progress in the gen ed. That's always where we start, as Mary described, the least restrictive environment, and then accessing that curriculum. So the team determines the need, as I said, and then who has the greatest level of expertise to address whatever that need is that's been identified. So it could be a physical therapist, it could be an occupational therapist, it might be both of us. It might not be, it might just be an OT. So again, it's very specific to the student through that assessment process, and then who has the greatest level of expertise to address whatever that particular need is in order for that student to benefit from their specialized instruction and make progress in their curriculum. So that was quick, down and dirty. I don't know if anyone has any questions. I'm happy to be here for a little while after we're finished. Yes?
Is there a time when a student, because if the IEP board makes a decision on what related service the student gets, the parent feels like, well, I feel like you should also get this service, is there a due process for that? Like, okay, repeat the question.
Okay. The question is if a parent is, and I'm paraphrasing, but if a parent feels as though a service is indicated and the therapist, I'll just use myself as an example, and I don't feel that physical therapy is necessary, is there the ability to go to due process over things like that? And the answer to that would be yes. I mean, we would hope it wouldn't get to that point, of course. But we would really want to hear, we always like to get the parents' input. Sometimes what kids do at school is very different from what kids do at home, so it's important to get that information. But we would work to try to come to some consensus about, you know, what it is that you're feeling like they're not getting by not having that particular service and what we can do to help meet that need. Okay? Okay.
Good evening. I'm LaRonda Owens. I'm the compliance supervisor in the Department of Special Education. And in essence, that's kind of my department. We make sure that the children's rights are protected. We work for the district, but we are here to make sure that all of the law has been followed in that special education process. So the most important part of that is for you to know your rights. Every parent should be provided your parents' rights or procedural safeguards at least once per year. At a minimum, you should get this once per year. And it is also in the parent's native language. This procedural safeguards is a full explanation of all of the parent's rights that are in an easily understandable manner and in your native language. So if you don't have a child with a disability and you are not involved in the IEP process, this document is still available at our website. Go to the main PGCPS website, then go to the Department of Special Education, and it's there for you to review. But this explains all of a parent's rights regarding the special education process. And that includes when there is a disagreement that a parent feels things should be different. Okay? We want to make sure that you have that procedural safeguard, so you will also have a copy of what your rights are. Also, we want to make sure that we're working together. If you notice on our puzzle, the students are the most important thing, and we work around them as a team. So if you ever have concerns about anything about your child's process in school, either special education or not, always start at that head with the principal or the school administration team. They are there working with your child every day. They would be the first contact to kind of get your concerns presented to, so we can figure out how to resolve it. You can also seek out support from the instructional director or your for the school or the area. You can feel free to always contact the Department of Special Education, Instruction and Compliance. We're here to help. You can also contact the Partners for Success Parent Center, which is helped to sponsor this tonight. And also you can go outside to the Maryland State Department of Education if you choose. We want to make sure we're working together to resolve disagreements, because we know you are an advocate for your child. You're the best advocate. No one knows your child better than you. You're the child's first teacher, the first role model. So we need you to work with us as a team to make sure that we are addressing any concerns that you have about your child's educational process. So you bring us tons of information about your child, and we also have an obligation to do these things, to make sure that we will provide your child with a free, appropriate public education that will include specialized education and related services designed to meet your child's needs to prepare them for education, employment, and independent living. We are also here to support you, help assist you and the school teams to resolve any conflicts that may arise. Let's work together again. When you seek support from the central office, a lot of times parents don't know that we're even there. We have instructional specialists and compliance specialists that are assigned to every school in the district. We are here to help you, so if you contact us, we will then independently gather facts and information about what your concerns are. We'll review the students' records to see what we see to determine their disability, educational history. We will ask questions to try to help define your concerns. We'll offer solutions and proposals to resolve any conflicts. We will even attend meetings to ensure that the students' rights are protected. And we will then do follow-up to ensure that any agreements, documents, IEPs are then fully implemented by the school team. I thought I would end with this little picture. I think sometimes parents come to meetings and that's how they feel outnumbered. And I think Mary kind of talked about that. We often have to have many persons at the table to make sure that we're addressing all the child's areas of need. So it could be an occupational therapist, a speech therapist, a PT, a psychologist, someone from central office. So sometimes you look like you're outnumbered, but we don't want you to feel that way. We want you to remember that we are always the first resource, and we are always here to help in the Department of Special Education central office. But if you don't feel like you've gotten your concerns answered with us, which usually doesn't happen, but you can always seek support from the outside, and one of those support options is the facilitated IEP process. So I'd like to welcome Mr. Donzel Robinson to discuss that with you.
So good afternoon, my name is Donzel Robinson, and I'm from outside of the Prince George's County Public Schools. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my company and what we do, and give you a little background of who I am. So I am the executive director of the Key Bridge Foundation. We are a national mediation firm. We primarily, our main task that we do, we manage the U.S. Department of Justice's Americans with Disability Act mediation program. So we have about 300 mediators throughout the country, and we've done over 5,000 now, 88 cases where a person who believes that their rights under the Americans with Disabilities Act has been violated, they file a complaint with the U.S. Department of Justice, and the U.S. Department of Justice refers it to us to try to resolve through mediation. So, that's one of where we come from in our approach. As a resident of Prince George's County, as a graduate of Central High School, unfortunately, I guess this is what, Fairmont Heights, or what's the high school?
Northwestern.
Okay, that's a bad school too. Northwestern is a bad school too. Central, Falcons, Walker Mill Middle School, Thomas Claggett Elementary. one of the things that I wanted to do as a person who is both a vendor and a specialist in the area who provides services for the state is bring all of the services that we provide in the state of Maryland to Prince George's County. So right now we are funded by the governor's office, by governor, the administrative office of the court, and the Maryland State Department of Education to do 3 programs in the state, but we're bringing them to Prince George's County because they're provided in other counties and then they're referred from other counties to Prince George's County, which makes no sense to me. So those 3 programs are community conferencing, which primarily is done through the Department of Juvenile Services. It's a diversionary program for youth who are involved in conflict. So referrals come from both Department of Juvenile Services as well as from the schools. And in your handbook under interventions, because there's the interventions and disciplinary actions, I guess it's the intervention 2 and intervention 4, you'll see listed community conferencing, which is a way to divert children from being suspended or expelled from schools. We also provide, in other counties, and we're bringing it to Prince George's County, what's called attendance mediation or truancy mediation, as most of you all know it as, and there are many statistics that show that we're 90% of victims of homicide who are youth are also high truancy students, where if a child is a high truancy student in 1st grade, 87% of those students are a grade level behind by the time they reach 5th grade. So we are also beginning to develop a truancy mediation program for Prince George's County. And finally, we are doing what's called, and we have to add a word, there's an independent IEP facilitation. Because within the MSDE program, there are IEP facilitators, which are a little different than who we are. We are outside individuals. We don't serve as advocates for the parent. We're not employees of the school system or the Maryland State Department of Education. And what our role is in an IEP program is to help facilitate the conversation. You know, it's one of the things, and I won't do it here because I tried to do it another place and the parents didn't go along. We talk about in our trainings how communication happens. And one of the exercises that we do in trying to show how communication happens is we pass out cards to everyone. We say, find your match. So one card may say a lion, the other card may say a tiger, the other card may say a bear. And what you have to do is make the sound of the animal to find the animal that matches you. So imagine being a lion, imagine being a tiger, and you're going, okay, what sound does a lion make? So everyone's going to go roar, right? And then the other person who has the tiger card, you know, says, what sound does a lion make? Or a tiger or a lion. Both of them are going to be roar. So you're going to walk around the room and you're going to be roaring, and you're going to think you found your match because you're both roaring. And what you find is, while you seem to be communicating in the same way, you're not the same. And as a team member, which he eloquently said, you know, and that is the truth, an IEP is about a team. You have the parent, you have the teachers, you have the special ed. You feel like we all are here for this child. But you may find on occasion that you're not communicating the same way. And ironically, you know, my ears are always working. When you ask the question, it has to happen in the least restrictive environment. You ask, where does that decision happen? And Mary, you know, being the person that she is, you know, she gave, you know, an answer about trying to give an explanation. But for me, if that happened in a meeting, first thing I would say, so it sounds like, you know, decision making is something that's important, and it sounds like you're looking for when, where, and how that decision is made. And I would check in, and you'll probably say, yeah. And I say, but that sounds like it's a little different than what the answer that Mary gave. Were you satisfied with the answer? And hopefully, because a third person is there, that's the expectation I have. No, that wasn't quite it. But in a meeting, if you went back to that slide, filling out number, you may nod yes in the moment because you realize people are crunched for time, and you don't want to show that you're a team player, but you have other concerns. So as an IEP facilitator, and you know, I tell people all the time, my wife says, you know, I'm not acting, I say I'm acting. And I say, you know, I play the dumb mediator role. And I say, you know, well, help me understand, because I'm not sure if I understood. Is this the place where we would talk about how that decision is made, or is there someone else? And I think that may help with the question that you initially had, even tonight, because it sounded like what you really wanted to answer to was when, where, and how does the decision around, is this the most least restrictive environment for for a child to receive that free, appropriate public education to happen? And then we would figure out, is this the time to ask that question, or do we ask that question at another meeting. Because I think even if we couldn't answer the question in that meeting, that would at least give you clarity around when that you can get an answer to that question. Now, would that be helpful? It would. So, and that was what the benefit of an independent facilitative IEP person is. So if you go out this door, to the right, on the right, there are flyers that kind of talk about how to get a person to come to your IEP meeting. And, you know, one of the things you may be asking yourself is, well, when should you request an independent IEP facilitator? I would say anytime you have a meeting, because our role, again, isn't to advocate, it isn't to say that there's a problem, but our role is to improve the conversation. Our role is to allow a lot of information to be translated or communicated and make sure everyone understands in the limited time that individuals have for that meeting, okay? So now if you go out there, presently, as I said, one of the things that we're doing is bringing services to Prince George's County. You will notice that under Prince George's County, if you want to request an independent IEP facilitator, it will say contact the Conflict Resolution Center of Montgomery County. Today. So with only 5 months being left in the school system, we're going to leave it that way for now. Mary has my personal information. If you do want an independent IEP facilitator, it will be someone from Prince George's County. The way it works, so we didn't have to change the process in the middle of the school year, is you will contact them, they will contact me, we will make sure there is someone there at that meeting to facilitate it, okay? And then when we get the new flyers for the new year, and when, you know, our wonderful district, you know, representative for the school board holds another meeting, we'll have those flyers that say in Prince George's County, okay? So if you have any questions, I'll stay around until we go into the breakout sessions. I'll be more than happy to answer them. But again, the flyers are on, I believe, this last table to the right, on the right. Thank you so much. Yes, yes.
So your services are available upon request, it doesn't require an approval from anyone within the system?
No, they are available upon request. And like I said, this is provided through the Maryland State Department of Education, Division of Special Education and Early Intervention. You know, they pay for it, it's free to you as a parent, and it is available upon request.
Excuse me, Mr. I'll add a caveat. The only thing that we ask that the parents let us know that you are using a facilitator from the outside, so we know that they're coming.
Exactly, and one other thing that kind of reminded me, I think Mary talked about earlier about letting people know in advance if you have questions. I mean, and that's what our role is, to also facilitate that, because we, as a neutral, we recognize everyone is working hard for the same thing. And when she talked about if you have specific questions so people can allow for time, that is something that we would do, in that we would talk to the lead for the IEP team at the school in advance. We would talk to the parent in advance, and we would ask them, what are some of the things that you would like to cover in this meeting? And we would kind of develop an agenda so that everyone knows what is going to be discussed in that meeting. And you'll be surprised, just having that agenda cuts down on a lot of misunderstanding between the school part of the team and the parent part of the team. You gonna wait? All right.
You gonna wait? Oh, go ahead.
Oh, for her. Oh.
I'm gonna ask a question, I'm a parent again. How often, that's right, you see how she's looking, I'm a parent again, I told you all, I'm a parent tonight. So how often can you request these meetings? Do you just arbitrarily do it, or, even in the normal course of a school year, we like to know when we're doing good, when things are not so good, but how often do you request an IEP team meeting?
We're going to hold one automatically annually, but you can request one at any time.
And the whole team comes in, a team is at every meeting, or is it just certain persons on the team when you call that meeting?
The team members that have to be there are the principal, a special educator, a general educator, and you. If you want somebody else specifically to be there, then you need to be forthcoming. Okay? I wanted to introduce our last panel member, and that's Pamela Talley, who happens to also be a co-chair of our Special Education Citizens Advisory Committee. Pamela?
Good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Pamela Talley, and I'm here first as a parent. I have 2 children in Prince George's County Public Schools. One is 10 and one is 14. My 10-year-old has a disability, and we've kind of been in this for 8 years now. We started at early childhood education, and we've kind of been somewhere in between for those 8 years, all the way down to home and hospital. You know, in the best interest of time, I'm just going to share with you just a few things. When I first received my child's diagnosis, all the range of emotions came through. But I can tell you what, the fear didn't come from thinking that my child was different. The fear came from, I don't know what I'm doing. And the best advice I got was the very first piece of advice I got late one night as I was leaving the doctor's office. The best predictor of a child's success is parent involvement. That's the first piece of advice I got, and that's the one that has sustained me throughout this process. And so if you're here as a parent, you're building a path to that success. So give yourself a pat on the back. Briefly, what I could just say about the process is that some of the times have gone great, sometimes some of the things I've gone through have not been great. But guess what? The thing that I have learned is that you need to trust the process. Things happen. We're human. We make mistakes. I made mistakes. Other people made mistakes. It's not an indictment. You know, if you make a mistake somewhere along the process, it can be fixed. Just as the question came, how many times can you have an IEP meeting? As many times as is necessary when you discover that there may be a challenge that we may have overlooked, that needs to be addressed. So as many times as you need to have that meeting, you can request to have a meeting. So I have learned that we need to trust the process and that it's okay if you make a mistake. Throughout the process, I ask myself one question: has my child been safe? That's the first thing that I want to make sure that happens when my child leaves home. And throughout the process, my child has been safe. And so that's one thing that I'm always grateful of when both my children leave home. They're safe. And so with that said, I just wanted to mention a little bit about CCAT, the Special Education Citizens Advisory Committee. Interesting. The thing that brought me to this committee is that my child was sent to a non-public school, and so I was like, well, what is going on now? I want to kind of be connected to my community. I want to know what's going on, not only in special education, but in education, period. So this led me to the Special Education Advisory Committee meetings, and I learned, although I had been through a lot of the processes, that there was a lot more to learn. So this is a wonderful committee. We meet every 4th Tuesday of the month at the Arc of Prince George's County from 6:30. Our meeting started at 6:30 until 8 o'clock. And we talk about a range of topics that parents are interested in. We need to hear your voice because we bring up topics. Our agenda is based on what the community wants to learn more about. And so we've talked about things like transportation. We've talked about Common Core curriculum. We're just there to make sure that we're covering all of the things that people have questions about. We even have a comment question box. So if we're talking about we have an agenda, and someone wants to really know more about a particular service or that is within special education, let us know. Slip it in there anonymously, slip us a note, send us an email. Our website is in this brochure. And I think I'm just going to leave it at that. I want you guys to be able to have time to get out to the breakout sessions and to be able to get your individual questions met. But at our meetings, we mostly talk about global issues. I did want to mention that. So if you have a specific issue, please let us know. Our websites, our individual email addresses are on the website. So if you have something that you specifically want answered, please let us know. We'll make sure that we talk to the department head